Zara shifted the weight of the worn-out grocery bag in her arms, feeling the plastic handles bite into her skin. The scorching midday sun, relentless in its intensity, made her squint against the brightness as she trudged along the uneven pavement of the impoverished neighborhood she called home. She was only 19, yet life had already carved lines of worry into her brow. With each step, the battered soles of her shoes threatened to fall apart, a glaring reminder of how precarious her situation had become. As she approached the ramshackle apartment complex, Zara forced her thoughts away from the fatigue gnawing at her muscles. Her mind drifted to her father, who had once been a pillar of strength. Before his accident, he worked long hours at the local factory, coming home every evening with a warm smile and a playful tease for his children. Now, at 43, her father was bedridden, his back and legs severely damaged after a tragic construction mishap. Then there were her two younger siblings, 12-year-old Marina and 7-year-old Finn. Neither child had any concept of a carefree childhood. They had grown accustomed to meager meals and scrimping every coin. At the apartment door, Zara shifted the bag to one arm and knocked gently. She didn't expect an answer since the door was rarely locked. No one in this neighborhood had much worth stealing. Sure enough, she pushed it open with a creak and stepped inside. Zara, a soft, raspy voice called from the dimly lit living room. "It's me, Papa," she replied, forcing cheer into her voice. "I brought some rice and a few vegetables. Mr. Lou at the corner store gave me a small discount again." She tried to inject gratitude and optimism into her words, hoping to keep her father's spirits alive. The living room was uncomfortably hot, with a single flickering bulb casting harsh shadows on the peeling walls. A faded sofa stood on one side, while a tattered rug covered the stained tiles. "Marina and Finn are in the bedroom," her father said. "They wanted to help you, but I told them to stay inside." His tone was heavy with guilt. Zara knew he blamed himself for their predicament, even though the accident had been caused by a safety lapse at his job. Her father's condition had been complicated by the lack of proper medical care. They simply couldn't afford hospital bills or physical therapy. Zara put the groceries on a small wooden table. The entire kitchen living area was only a few steps from the front door, separated by a flimsy partition. She turned to look at her father, lying on the old couch with cushions that sank beneath him. "How are you feeling today?" she asked gently, kneeling beside him. He inhaled deeply, wincing slightly. "The same. Pain comes and goes." She noticed the beads of sweat on his forehead. Without air conditioning or even a simple fan that worked reliably, the room felt like a furnace. She reached for a rag and some water, dabbing his forehead to cool him down. "Where did you work this morning?" her father asked, his eyes lingering on the fresh bruise forming on her forearm, likely from carrying heavy loads at her last shift. "Same place," Zara replied, offering a small smile. "I went to the diner first at dawn, then the bakery after that." Her father's lips tightened. She knew the expression. It was frustration, pity, and shame rolled into one. He hated that his eldest child had to give up school to become the family's primary breadwinner. Zara had once been a bright student, known for her clever arguments and shining academic record. Her teachers used to call her the little lawyer in the making. But those dreams had crumbled under the weight of unpaid medical bills and daily survival. "Papa," Zara said softly, "you told me once that we do what we must to survive, right?" He didn't reply, but she saw the moisture glisten in his tired eyes. He gave a weary nod and reached out to squeeze her hand. Just then, Marina and Finn emerged from the bedroom. Marina, tall for her age, with big brown eyes, approached shyly. Finn, smaller and thinner than most kids his age, trailed behind her, clinging to her tattered dress. "Zara," Finn exclaimed, eyes lighting up at the sight of his sister. "Can I help with the groceries?" His eagerness made Zara's heart twist. She smiled and nodded, handing him a smaller packet of vegetables. "Sure, buddy. Just put them on the kitchen counter." Marina offered a faint smile. "Did you manage to eat today?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. At 12, she was already behaving more like a young adult than a child. Zara nodded. not wanting to admit she'd skipped lunch to save money. She was used to a constant ache in her stomach. Hunger had become a permanent companion, dulling her senses and sometimes making her dizzy. She shooed her siblings back into the small bedroom, no bigger than a closet, so they could continue whatever game they'd been playing. With them out of earshot, Zara turned to her father. The question hung unspoken between them. How much money did she make today? And would it be enough to appease the landlord, who was becoming increasingly hostile? How long do we have? Her father finally asked, keeping his voice low. Not long, Zara said, taking a slow breath to compose herself. Mrs. Ortega said we're behind by 6 months. She wants everything by next week. She heard him exhale sharply. The cost of rent plus overdue payments was astronomical to them. Nearly an entire year's worth of her meager earnings, even if she worked double shifts every day. She grimaced, wishing she could hide the bleakness of the situation. I don't want you doing anything desperate, her father murmured, his eyes full of concern. A heavy silence fell between them. Desperation was already creeping into Zara's heart, but she forced a smile, leaned in, and kissed her father on the forehead. I'll figure something out, she promised, even though she had no idea how. Over the course of that evening, Zara prepared a simple meal of rice and the scant vegetables she could afford, carefully dividing portions to ensure everyone got something, no matter how small. She watched her siblings eat slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a rare delicacy. Then she did the dishes in the cramped sink, listening to the constant drip of a leaky faucet. Finally, when the moon rose high outside their single window, Zara lay down on the living room floor, a threadbare blanket over her. She stared at the ceiling for hours, imagining what life would be like if she could finish her education, become a lawyer, and fight for the rights of people like her father. Instead, she felt trapped in a situation where her dreams seemed laughably out of reach. Drifting in and out of restless sleep, Zara prayed that some miracle would happen. She prayed for her father's health, for her siblings' futures, for a solution to their overdue rent. But deep down, she knew miracles rarely came for people like them. At some point in the middle of the night, Zara's tears dried on her cheeks, and she sank into an uneasy slumber, burdened by a desperation she was only beginning to realize would become much worse. The following morning, Zara woke at dawn. Before she could even change into her waitress uniform, a sharp knock came at the door. She hurriedly tied her hair back, glancing over at her father, who was stirring awake on the couch. Zara, it's Mrs. Ortega, he said, voice strained. She said she'd be coming by to check on the rent. Be careful. Zara felt a chill creep over her. Their landlord's visits were never pleasant. She was a woman in her 50s, known in the neighborhood for her quick temper and ruthless methods of dealing with late payers. The moment Zara opened the door, Mrs. Ortega swept inside, like she owned the place. Good morning, Zara said politely, forcing a tight smile. There's nothing good about this morning, Mrs. Ortega snapped, her beady eyes scanning the apartment. I've come for the rent, no more excuses. A wave of tension filled the living room. Mrs. Ortega's gaze swept over the shabby furniture, the peeling paint on the walls, and the meager possessions stacked in corners. She sneered, as though the sight of their poverty disgusted her. Zara tried to maintain her composure. Mrs. Ortega, I know we're behind, she began quietly. But please, if you could just give us a little more time. Maybe another month. I'm working 2 jobs. Mrs. Ortega snorted, cutting her off. A month? You've had 6. And I see no evidence that you'll magically gather that money. My patience has run out. Either you pay the 6 months' worth of rent by next week, or I'm evicting you. I've been more than generous already. Zara clenched her fists at her sides. She could feel her father's worried gaze on her back. He started to speak from the couch, voice trembling. Mrs. Ortega, please listen. My daughter works tirelessly. There must be some arrangement we can make. Your arrangement is this, the landlord snapped, pointing a manicured finger at him. You pay me what's due, or you're all out on the street. I have no room for pity. Business is business. Zara inhaled slowly, reminding herself that it wouldn't help to argue. Mrs. Ortega wielded power over them, the power to make them homeless with a single stroke of her pen. Zara forced her voice to stay level. "We understand," she said, "but if you could just—" "You have until next week," Mrs. Ortega barked, not bothering to let her finish. Then her gaze fell on the siblings peeking out from the bedroom doorway. "Stop hiding behind that door, you brats. You'll be out of here soon enough if your sister doesn't come up with the money." Marina shrank back, her face pale with fear. Finn clung to her, visibly trembling. Zara's anger flared at the cruel way the landlord spoke to them, but she bit her tongue. Mrs. Ortega smirked. "I'll be waiting. 1 week. Not a day longer." With that, the woman turned on her heel and stomped out, leaving the door open behind her. Zara stood in the aftermath, her heart pounding, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. She couldn't bring herself to look at her father or siblings. She didn't want them to see how close she was to breaking down. Finally, her father spoke. "Zara, I'm sorry. It's not your fault," she interrupted, her voice tight. She busied herself with tying on her apron, the fabric worn and stained. "I have to go to work. We'll figure something out, Papa." She knew the words sounded hollow. As she left the apartment, the sun rising in the sky did nothing to brighten her spirits. All she could think about was the impossible sum they owed. Even if she worked 20 hours a day for the rest of the month, it would barely cover a fraction of the rent, let alone 6 months' worth. That day at the diner, Zara had juggled orders, cleaned tables, and forced a smile for the customers, hoping for spare tips. Her mind swirled with numbers, desperately calculating how to keep her family afloat. By late afternoon, she collapsed into a chair in the break room, rubbing her sore feet. The diner's manager, a kind older woman named Rosalie, joined her, offering a cup of lukewarm coffee. "You look more exhausted than usual, kid," Rosalie said gently. "Everything okay?" Zara sighed, clasping the paper cup in both hands. "I wish I could say yes, but my landlord is threatening eviction." Rosalie's eyes widened. "I know you've been behind for a while. I'm sorry, Zara. I wish I could give you a raise, but business here is tough." "I know," Zara said with a sad smile. "I'm grateful for what you already do. If it weren't for this job, we'd be on the streets." Rosalie reached out and patted Zara's hand. "Just hang in there, okay? Something's bound to work out." By the time Zara finished her second job at the bakery, the sky had darkened. She carried a small bag of day-old bread the baker had kindly given her. The walk home felt endless, with the weight of her worries pressing down on her shoulders. Back at the apartment, she found her father awake, trying to ease some of his pain by adjusting his position on the couch. Marina and Finn were reading a tattered storybook, probably borrowed from the local library. Zara greeted them and handed out the bread, ignoring her own hunger. "We'll have to be careful this week with the food," Zara warned gently. "Let's all share whatever we can get. I'll try to pick up extra shifts." Her siblings nodded somberly, well accustomed to these discussions. After a quiet dinner, Zara cleaned up, then curled up on the floor once again, a swirl of anxiety preventing her from sleeping. Images flashed through her mind. Mrs. Ortega banging on the door, her father forced out of the only home they had, her siblings wandering the streets. The helplessness felt like a tight fist around her heart. Over the next few days, she left home before sunrise and returned well after dark, each time counting her tips and wages, each time realizing it would never be enough. She avoided Mrs. Ortega as best she could, knowing she had no new excuses to offer. On the 6th day of her final week's reprieve, Zara returned to find her father in tears. "I'm useless like this," he whispered, unable to meet her eyes. "I can't protect you. I can't earn anything. I'm just a burden." Zara clasped his hand tightly, tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. "Don't say that. You're our father. We love you, and we need you. We'll figure something out, I promise. Please don't lose hope." But the truth was, hope felt like a distant memory. In the darkness, lying awake yet again, Zara's mind churned through wild ideas. Robbing a bank? Impossible. Pleading with neighbors? They were almost as poor as she was. Going to the police for help? They had bigger problems to handle in the city, and the landlord's threats weren't technically illegal. Just when she felt she might break under the despair, An unexpected encounter at her next job would change everything, though not at all in the way she had hoped. The upscale restaurant was an odd place for Zara to end up, considering her background. She'd only been hired as an on-call waitress for big events, weddings, corporate gatherings, and the occasional private party for high-end clients. The pay was slightly better than her other jobs, and though she felt out of place among the wealthy clientele, she kept her head down and did her best. On this particular night, the restaurant glittered with expensive chandeliers, each table set with fine silverware and crystal glasses. Soft classical music drifted in the air, and well-dressed guests chatted in hushed tones. Zara wore a simple black uniform, trying to look inconspicuous. She moved from table to table, refilling water glasses and taking orders with a polite smile. About halfway through the evening, she noticed a man enter the establishment with an air of supreme confidence. He was tall, with dark hair brushed neatly back, wearing a perfectly tailored suit. His mere presence caused the staff to straighten their postures. The restaurant's manager hurried over to greet him personally. Customers turned to look at him, some whispering excitedly. Zara didn't recognize him at first, but she sensed he was someone important. The manager pointed in her direction, and the man's gaze followed, his eyes instantly locking onto her. She tried not to stare, but she found it difficult to break away from his magnetic presence. Once seated at a secluded booth, the man placed his order, which consisted of some of the restaurant's finest dishes. Zara served him with the same courteous efficiency she offered everyone else, but she couldn't deny an uneasy feeling as his sharp eyes followed her every move. Towards the end of the night, the restaurant began winding down. Most guests finished their meals and left, but the man lingered. Zara was wiping a nearby table when he spoke, his voice deep and smooth. "What's your name?" he asked abruptly, causing Zara to nearly drop her cloth. "Excuse me," she replied, carefully turning to face him. He gave a cold smile. "Your name? I assumed the manager didn't mention it, so I'm asking you directly." She swallowed. "Zara," she answered, heart pounding. His gaze roamed over her, calculating. "Zara, I'm Mr. Hayes." He held out a sleek business card, which Zara took with trembling fingers. Embossed gold letters spelled out his name, Alexander Hayes, beneath a line that said Hayes Industries and Royal Holdings. She had no idea what Royal Holdings implied. Can I help you with something else, Mr. Hayes?" she managed, forcing her voice to remain steady. He leaned back, crossing his legs. "No, you've already been quite attentive, but I have a feeling you want more out of life than just waitressing." Zara blinked, uncertain. Why was he talking to her like this? She felt suddenly exposed. "I'm not sure what you mean." Mr. Hayes smirked. "I see potential in you. Call me if you want to change your life forever," he said, tapping the edge of the business card in her hand. Before she could respond, he stood, placed a thick wad of cash on the table for the bill, and walked away. The flurry of activity, his sudden exit, the manager's frantic attempts to escort him out, left Zara reeling. In her palm, the card felt heavier than it should. That night, Zara returned home to find her father and siblings asleep. She slipped quietly to the kitchen, setting down her purse and uniform. Still dressed in her worn-out shoes, she pulled out the card and set it on the table. The letters gleamed under the dim light. Alexander Hayes. She recalled his dark suit and the intensity of his eyes. Who was he really? The idea of calling him frightened her. He was clearly wealthy and powerful, the kind of man she had no experience dealing with. Yet, the memory of Mrs. Ortega's ultimatum flashed through her mind. Pay 6 months' rent in a week or face eviction. Could Mr. Hayes help? Was his offer genuine or a trap? Zara felt her stomach twist. She had grown up in a tough neighborhood and had learned to be wary of easy offers that smelled of danger. Still, how many times in her life would a billionaire slip her a business card with a promise like that? Sleep evaded her, and by early morning, she finally drifted off, only to wake a couple of hours later to the same desperation. Over the next few days, Zara stared at the business card often, but she didn't dial the number. She tried every legal route she could think of, approaching charities, begging her manager for an advance, asking distant relatives if they could lend her money. Nothing materialized. Meanwhile, Mrs. Ortega's threats intensified. She began banging on the door at random intervals, a shrill voice echoing in the hallway, warning that eviction was imminent. "Zara," her father said one evening as she sat on the sofa, business card in hand. He had caught her looking at it, her brow furrowed in deep concentration. "What's that?" She hesitated, then decided to be honest. "A man gave me his card. A very rich man. He said if I wanted to change my life, I should call him." Her father frowned, struggling to sit upright. "Why would a rich man say that to you out of the blue? Sounds suspicious. Please be careful." "I know," she murmured. "But what if he can help? I mean, the rent is due, and I've tried everything else. We have nothing left." Her father looked haunted by the possibility. "You don't know what he'll ask of you in return." Zara didn't respond, but the unspoken truth hung in the air. Nothing in this world came for free, especially not from someone with immeasurable wealth. She gulped, wondering if she was teetering on the edge of a decision she could never undo. The day before Mrs. Ortega's final deadline, Zara stood by the apartment's tiny window, her heart racing. Her phone felt like a lead weight in her hand as she dialed the number on the card. It rang once, twice, 3 times. She almost hung up, panic rising in her throat. Then a smooth voice answered. "Yes." Zara swallowed. "Mr. Hayes, it's Zara, the waitress you gave your card to." A pause. "Zara," he said, as if tasting the name. "I was wondering when you'd call." "I wasn't sure I should," Zara admitted, her voice trembling. "But my family is in trouble. With rent. With everything, really." "I figured as much," Mr. Hayes replied coolly. "Would you like to discuss a possible arrangement?" Zara's palm felt clammy around the phone. "Yes. Meet me tomorrow evening at the Regency Hotel, penthouse suite," he said. "Come alone. Dress appropriately." She hesitated, her mind screaming caution. "I don't have anything fancy," she managed, thinking of her threadbare dresses. Mr. Hayes chuckled lightly. "Just come as you are then. I'll handle the rest." The call ended abruptly, and Zara sank onto the sofa, her heart thunderous in her chest. She knew she had crossed a threshold. Whether it was a step toward salvation or damnation, she couldn't say. But she had no choice. One last desperate bid to save her family's home from eviction. The following evening, Zara traveled across the city by bus, feeling out of place among well-dressed commuters. She was wearing her cleanest outfit, a plain black dress that at least looked somewhat formal. Her battered shoes and borrowed handbag from a neighbor didn't match the elegance of the high-end destination she was heading toward. When she arrived at the Regency Hotel, a doorman in a crisp uniform opened the grand glass doors. She swallowed her nerves, stepping into a marble-floored lobby that seemed to sparkle under the chandelier lights. Everything about the place screamed opulence, rich velvet furniture, towering floral arrangements, and a staff that moved with impeccable grace. "Can I help you?" a receptionist asked, raising a perfectly arched eyebrow at Zara's simple attire. "I'm here to meet Mr. Hayes," Zara said, voice shaking. "He said the penthouse suite." The receptionist gave her a thorough once-over, then picked up a phone to confirm. A moment later, the receptionist's demeanor changed to polite efficiency. "Yes, of course. Please take the private elevator to the top floor." Zara followed the direction to a discreet hallway, where a sleek elevator with mirrored walls awaited. As she ascended, her reflection revealed a pale, terrified young woman. She took a deep breath, willing herself to remain calm. The elevator doors opened onto a luxurious foyer that led to a single door. Zara approached and pressed the doorbell, her stomach churning. A moment later, the door swung open, and she found herself face to face with Mr. Hayes, looking as polished as ever in a tailored suit. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. The suite was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city skyline, plush white sofas, a grand piano in the corner, and champagne on ice. Zara clutched her handbag. "This place is beautiful," she said, her voice almost a whisper. Mr. Hayes offered a cold smile. "I'm accustomed to nice things." I assume you'd like to be as well. She bit her lip, unsure how to respond. They stood in silence for a moment, the tension thick. Finally, he gestured for her to sit on a couch. Zara perched on the edge, trying to maintain her composure. Mr. Hayes settled opposite her, steepling his fingers under his chin. So, Zara, he began, I have an offer that could solve your financial problems. But it comes with certain conditions. Her pulse quickened. What kind of conditions? He steadied her expression. I'm a man who values privacy. My personal life is complicated, especially given my status. I need someone discreet by my side, someone who will do as I say, accompany me to social functions, travel with me when necessary. Zara's mind raced. This sounded like more than just being an assistant. Something about his tone hinted at an arrangement that went beyond professional boundaries. And in exchange, she asked cautiously, I'll pay you a generous sum, enough to clear all your family's debts. More than that, I'll ensure you have money left over. You'll live comfortably for the rest of your life if you play your cards right. Her heart hammered. She pictured Mrs. Ortega's triumphant face if she couldn't pay the rent, her siblings cast out on the street. The temptation was almost overwhelming. But what do I have to do? Zara pressed. She needed clarity, no matter how unpleasant it might be. Mr. Hayes sighed, as if dealing with a child. To be blunt, you will be mine for a year, my personal companion, subject to my rules and demands. You'll sign a contract that outlines everything, confidentiality, behavioral expectations, sexual exclusivity. In return, I'll deposit a life-changing amount of money into your account. Zara felt her stomach lurch. She couldn't feign ignorance. He was asking her to sell her body, her freedom, for a year. The magnitude of it stole her breath. She thought about her father's warning. Be careful. You don't know what he'll ask of you. Now she knew, and it was worse than she'd imagined. Yet the alternative was equally horrifying. Homelessness, destitution, and the slow, agonizing decline of her family. I need time to think, she stammered, her throat dry. Mr. Hayes nodded curtly. Of course. I don't expect an immediate answer. Take 2 days. But understand that my offer is not open-ended. If you decide to do this, you must commit fully. He handed her a thick folder. This contract spells out the details. Read it carefully. There are no half measures in my world. Zara stared at the folder in her lap, her hands trembling. She felt as if she were standing on a precipice with an abyss below. If I sign this, when will I receive the money? She asked in a broken whisper. Upon the start of our agreement, I'll provide an initial payment that should cover your immediate needs, including rent and your father's care, Mr. Hayes replied. Subsequent monthly installments will follow. She rose slowly, the folder clutched against her chest. She could hardly meet his gaze. Mr. Hayes escorted her to the door, where his final words followed her like a chilling echo. I'll await your decision, Zara. But make no mistake, indecision will not serve you. Once home, Zara barricaded herself in the bedroom, scanning the pages of the contract by candlelight. The language was intimidatingly precise, leaving no room for misunderstanding. It detailed the tasks, the scope of their relationship, even restrictions on her personal freedom. She couldn't date. She had to be on call whenever he needed her, and she was expected to maintain secrecy about everything that happened between them. Anger flared in her chest as she read. How dare he reduce her to a commodity? But desperation kept her reading. She finally flipped to the compensation page, and her breath caught in her throat at the figures. She had never seen so many zeros in her life. Even the initial payment alone was enough to lift her family out of immediate danger. Her father's voice drifted through the thin wall, pained moans as he shifted position on the couch, stifling a groan to avoid worrying the children. Zara wiped away tears, torn between her moral revulsion and the brutal reality of her family's needs. In the morning, she found her father awake, dark circles under his eyes. I heard you coming late, he said quietly. Did you meet with that man? Zara swallowed hard, nodding. He offered a deal. What kind of deal? Her father pressed, his eyes flicking to the folder in her hand. She struggled to find words that wouldn't shatter him. It's complicated, she said finally. He's willing to pay enough to save us. I have to be his companion for a year. A tortured expression passed across her father's face. Zara, that sounds like a trap. You don't owe him your life. She knelt beside him, tears brimming. I know, Papa. But if I don't do this, we'll lose everything. We'll be out on the streets. Marina and Finn won't have a roof over their heads. You won't get the medical care you need. He tried to protest, but words failed him, and he began to weep softly. Zara had never seen her father cry with such despair. The sound tore at her heart. That entire day, Zara was absent-minded at work, messing up orders and dropping trays. Her manager noticed but didn't scold her. Pity was etched on Rosalie's face. Finally, after her shift, Zara sat on a bench outside the diner, the contract heavy in her bag. She gazed at the setting sun, the sky ablaze with oranges and reds. She thought of her mother, who had passed away when Zara was only 14. What would her mother have said? Probably that no amount of money was worth her dignity. But her mother had also believed in sacrifices for family. That night, as the final hours of Mr. Hayes' deadline approached, Zara made her choice. She laid the contract on the kitchen table, put pen to paper, and signed her name. Her father looked on, tears falling silently. Marina and Finn were already asleep in the bedroom. There was no need to expose them to the horror of the situation yet. When Zara stood, she felt numb, as if her soul had left her body. The next morning, she texted Mr. Hayes that she had signed the contract. His response came swiftly. Your life is about to change, Zara. I'll send a car for you tomorrow. The sense of finality in those words was a punch to her gut. She tried to reassure her father that everything would be okay, but neither of them truly believed it. The money arrived in her account later that day, the sum so large that the bank called to confirm it wasn't a mistake. Zara paid Mrs. Ortega in full, watching the landlord's eyes widen in stunned disbelief. A grim satisfaction flickered within Zara, though it was overshadowed by the dread of the bargain she had struck. That night, she barely slept, half expecting the devil himself to appear at her door. And in a way, he would come. Mr. Hayes was no ordinary man. He was wealthy, powerful, and she had just willingly put herself under his control. A sleek black limousine arrived in front of Zara's apartment building the next morning, drawing curious stares from neighbors. She hugged her siblings and father tightly at the door, trying not to sob. She left them with more money for living expenses, along with reassurances she would keep in touch. Her father's eyes brimmed with anxiety, but he managed to whisper, "Be strong, Zara." Clutching a small suitcase filled with her meager belongings, she climbed into the limousine. The driver, impeccably dressed, spoke little, only nodding respectfully. As the vehicle pulled away, Zara felt as if she were leaving one life behind and stepping into a world she was utterly unprepared for. Her journey took her far away, beyond the borders of her country. Mr. Hayes, as it turned out, was not just a billionaire, but a king in a foreign land, a twist that left her reeling. His estate was a sprawling palace surrounded by high walls, lush gardens, and a legion of uniformed guards. Zara gazed out the tinted car window as they passed through a massive iron gate. Beyond it lay manicured lawns, marble fountains, and blooming flowers in every hue imaginable. At the end of the long driveway stood the palace itself, an architectural marvel of towering spires and ornate pillars, a testament to wealth that went beyond mere millions. Once inside the palace, Zara was led through gilded hallways by a stern-faced housekeeper who introduced herself as Miss Graves. The staff she passed bowed their heads or curtsied slightly, though she sensed a frosty indifference behind their polite facade. Miss Graves guided her to an opulent bedroom suite. The room was larger than her entire apartment back home, adorned with silk curtains, a chandelier glittering overhead, and a four-poster bed draped in plush linens. A balcony overlooked the sprawling palace grounds. "This is where you'll stay," Miss Graves said stiffly. "Mr. Hayes will speak with you soon." Zara swallowed, setting her suitcase on the ornate rug. "Thank you," she managed. Before leaving, Miss Graves added, "A wardrobe has been prepared for you. You're expected to change into something appropriate for dinner. If you need assistance, ring the bell by the bedside." Zara nodded numbly, and the housekeeper swept out. As soon as she was alone, she sank onto the bed, running a hand over the satin coverlet. This was so far removed from anything she'd ever known. A part of her wanted to rejoice that she was finally away from squalor, but the oppressive sense of being owned overshadowed any excitement. The money might have solved her family's immediate crisis, but at what personal cost? True to Ms. Graves' words, the wardrobe was filled with designer clothing, dresses, shoes, handbags, all with tags that made Zara's head spin. She selected a modest dress in a soft champagne color for dinner, pairing it with low heels that, for once, weren't falling apart. Looking at her reflection in the opulent mirror, she barely recognized herself. Dinner was served in a grand dining hall, lit by massive chandeliers. The long table could seat dozens, but tonight it was just Mr. Hayes and Zara at one end. He rose as she entered, his gaze sweeping over her, inscrutable. "You look lovely," he said, gesturing for her to sit. She complied, feeling awkward. A discreet army of servers appeared, placing gourmet dishes in front of them. Lobster bisque, roasted lamb, fresh vegetables, and rich chocolate dessert. The aromas were intoxicating. Mr. Hayes engaged her in superficial conversation, asking about her background, her interests, yet never straying into truly personal territory. There was no mention of the contract, but the unspoken tension lingered between them. Zara ate mechanically, hardly tasting the food. After dinner, he dismissed the staff and turned to her. "I trust you find your accommodation suitable." She nodded. "They're very grand." His lips curved into a thin smile. "Good. I've instructed Miss Graves to see to your every comfort. Tomorrow, you'll begin your duties. You'll accompany me to a business meeting in the morning. Wear something business appropriate." Zara felt a pang of anxiety. "What exactly do you want me to do during these meetings?" "Look presentable and remain silent unless spoken to. My associates must see that you're attentive to me." The way he paused before attentive sent a shiver through her. Zara gave a small nod. She felt reduced to an accessory, but she had no choice. Over the next few weeks, Zara's life settled into a bizarre routine of luxury and restraint. By day, she accompanied Mr. Hayes to lavish boardrooms or networking events, wearing designer outfits and nodding politely while he conducted his affairs. By evening, she dined with him in the grand hall or sometimes in a more intimate drawing room, always with staff lurking discreetly in the background. After dinner, Mr. Hayes would retire, leaving Zara alone to wander the palace corridors or retreat to her suite. During these times, she explored the expansive grounds, visiting the rose garden, the fountain courtyard, and even stumbling upon an extensive library filled with leather-bound tomes. Yet despite the beauty and wealth, Zara felt an undercurrent of unease. Guards were positioned at nearly every corner. Security cameras tracked her movements. Every door to the outside world was locked or guarded, making it clear she couldn't just leave whenever she wished. When she tried calling home, she discovered her phone had no signal within the estate. Ms. Graves calmly explained that for security reasons, personal phone lines were disabled. Instead, she was offered a palace landline to make brief calls under supervision. She spoke to her father only a few times, relieved to hear he was using the money for medication and that Marina and Finn were able to buy new shoes for school. Still, Zara found her isolation stifling. The other staff members offered little friendship. Their interactions were polite but distant. She once tried chatting with a maid about her home country, only to be met with a forced smile and an excuse to leave. As time passed, Zara discovered that Mr. Hayes' generosity was coupled with a possessive streak. He insisted on knowing her whereabouts at all times. He once caught her in the library late at night, scanning through law books, her old dream returning in fleeting moments. The look on his face was displeased, as if her reading was an affront. "You'd prefer those dusty books to my company?" he asked, his tone chilling. Zara swallowed. "I didn't think you'd mind. I'm just trying to keep my mind sharp." He stared at her, and for an instant, she wondered if he would forbid her from reading. But after a tense pause, he said only, "Don't let it interfere with your obligations to me," before walking away. On another occasion, he presented her with an array of diamond jewelry to wear for a formal event. When she balked at the expense, he insisted in a tone that brooked no argument. That night, she felt like a showpiece, escorted on Mr. Hayes' arm as they attended a high society gala. Cameras flashed as they arrived, capturing the image of the billionaire king with his stunning companion. Zara recognized some of the world's elite in attendance, CEOs, politicians, even a few celebrities. Mr. Hayes introduced her simply as Zara, leaving the rest to speculation. She was bombarded by curious stares and shallow small talk. That night, in the back of the limousine returning to the palace, Zara mustered the courage to ask him directly, "What happens after a year?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You fulfill your contract, and I fulfill my financial obligations. After that, we part ways, unless you wish to renegotiate." His words were cold, reminding her that she was replaceable. She had signed over a year of her life to him, mind, body, and soul, and for the first time, she realized she might not emerge from this arrangement unscathed. One night, restless and unable to sleep, Zara wandered the palace halls. She had learned which corridors were most heavily guarded, and which ones seemed forgotten. She found herself drawn to a smaller, dimly lit wing where the staff offices were located. Most doors were locked, but one stood ajar, light spilling into the hallway. Zara hesitated, curiosity battling caution. She crept closer, hearing voices. Pressing herself against the wall, she peeked inside. Mr. Hayes stood with his back to the door, talking in low tones to a tall, silver-haired man Zara recognized as his senior advisor, Mr. Rochester. Their words were muffled, but the tension in the room was palpable. "She's too curious," Mr. Rochester was saying. "Are you sure about this arrangement? You remember what happened with the others?" Zara's heart lurched. "Others?" Mr. Hayes spoke, voice cold. "This one is different." She was desperate. That's why she agreed so quickly. "Nevertheless," Mr. Rochester persisted, "it could pose a risk if she starts digging around. We've disposed of similar problems before." "Disposed of?" Zara's mind reeled. She leaned forward to catch every word. Mr. Hayes seemed unconcerned. "That's why we have the contract. If she breaks it, it's her word against mine. And if she becomes a liability, well, you know what to do." Mr. Rochester cleared his throat. "We can't afford any loose ends. The last woman was already in near scandal, but we handled it." A chill ran down Zara's spine. Women who signed contracts then disappeared. She could hardly breathe. She recalled how no one in the palace talked much about Mr. Hayes' personal life. Even the staff's reserve made more sense now. Perhaps they knew the fate of those who tried to escape. Suddenly, Mr. Hayes turned, as if sensing a presence. Zara panicked, stepping back silently into the shadows. The conversation ended abruptly, and she heard the door closing. She darted down the hallway, heart pounding, slipping behind a nearby pillar. Moments later, Mr. Hayes and Mr. Rochester walked by, deep in conversation, disappearing around a corner. Zara stood frozen, her mind racing. She had to confirm what she'd just heard. Was it possible that Mr. Hayes harmed his previous companions? But the way they spoke made it sound like more than just a rumor. A wave of nausea overcame her as she realized the full gravity of her peril. Back in her suite, Zara locked the door and leaned against it, trying to steady her breathing. She replayed the conversation in her head, each word confirming that she was in far more danger than she ever imagined. She had signed a contract for a year, but what guarantee did she have that she'd be allowed to leave alive? Torn between terror and the determination to survive, Zara did the only thing she could think of. She began devising a plan. She needed proof of Mr. Hayes' wrongdoings, something that could protect her if she tried to leave. If she had evidence of his illegal activities, she might be able to leverage her safety. Her mind raced with possibilities. Hidden cameras, documents, emails? She knew she had to proceed carefully. Any sign of disloyalty would be catastrophic. Mr. Hayes' eyes seemed to be everywhere, and the palace staff was loyal, either out of fear or devotion. That night, Zara lay awake, haunted by images of women who had signed contracts just like hers and never been seen again. She wondered who they were, how far they had gotten before Mr. Hayes or his advisor deemed them a liability. The more she dwelled on it, the more determined she became to avoid their fate. In the midst of her growing paranoia, Zara found an unexpected ally. Asher, Mr. Hayes' personal security guard. He was tall, with a chiseled jawline and keen blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She had seen him at events, always a few paces behind Mr. Hayes, watchful and silent. One afternoon, while wandering the gardens, Zara noticed Asher quietly, following her at a distance. She paused by a rosebush, pretending to admire the flowers, then turned to address him. "You don't have to stalk me, you know," she said, forcing a small smile. Asher hesitated. "I'm just making sure you're safe, miss." "Safe from what?" Zara quipped, arching an eyebrow. "A rogue squirrel?" A flicker of amusement crossed his otherwise stoic face. "You'd be surprised how often a palace's security is tested from within." Zara's heart pounded. She wondered if Asher was hinting at something, or if she was reading too much into his words. Glancing around to ensure no one else was near, she decided to risk conversation. "What do you think of Mr. Hayes?" she asked quietly, half expecting him to snap at her for such a question. His gaze flicked around again. "He's my employer," he said carefully. "It's my job to protect him." "And do you?" she pressed. "Protect him from everyone, even those who have no intention of harming him." Asher met her eyes, and for a moment, she saw empathy. "Sometimes the lines blur," he murmured. "But if you're asking whether I'm loyal to him or not, I value my job. But I'm not blind." Zara swallowed. She nodded, unsure how much she could trust him. In the following days, Asher continued his watchful routine. But at times, when they passed in the corridors or locked eyes at an event, there was an unspoken understanding between them. He seemed aware of the tension she felt and the fear beneath her poised exterior. As the weeks turned into months, Zara found herself encountering Asher more frequently. A fleeting conversation here, a shared moment of silent understanding there. He would sometimes guide her away from prying eyes if he noticed she was growing anxious in Mr. Hayes' presence. One evening, after a long gala, Zara slipped away to the palace library, seeking solace among the books. Asher appeared in the doorway, his posture relaxed yet alert. "You shouldn't wander alone at night," he said quietly. "Are you worried I'll run away?" Zara asked, bitterness creeping into her tone. Asher took a step closer. "Maybe I'm worried about what will happen to you if you do." Zara blinked, holding his gaze. In that moment, she felt a rush of emotion, gratitude, fear, and a flicker of something else she couldn't quite name. She recalled the conversation she had overheard, the references to disposing of liabilities. "Why do you care?" she whispered. Asher exhaled slowly, looking as if he weighed his words carefully. "I've seen how he operates, and I've seen how you look trapped." A shiver went through her. "He wants to make sure I'm always under his control," she admitted, tears threatening to surface. "And it's not just me. There were others before." Asher's jaw tightened. "Be very careful, Zara. This place, it's beautiful on the surface, but there are secrets here that are best left buried. If you try to leave without a plan, you might not make it." The implied danger hung heavy in the air. Zara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She hated feeling so helpless. Yet she also felt a spark of hope. She wasn't entirely alone. There was at least one person within these walls who seemed to care about her well-being. It happened almost inevitably one late afternoon. Zara was in the palace courtyard, near a secluded corner adorned with climbing vines. She had managed to slip away from the watchful eyes of the staff to read in peace. Out of habit, she carried a small notebook where she scribbled thoughts and notes, some about Mr. Hayes, some about the contract, some about her fear. Asher appeared quietly, as he often did. "Fancy seeing you here," he said softly. Zara tucked her notebook away. "I didn't know I still had the capacity to enjoy gardens," she joked weakly. "Everything here feels so monitored." He studied her face. "It is. But this corner is off the main camera routes. If you ever need space, it's one of the few blind spots on the property." She gave him a surprised look. "How do you know that?" He shrugged. "I know every inch of the security layout. They fell silent. A breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of flowers. Zara thought about how unthinkable it was that they'd find a moment of quiet closeness in the midst of her captivity. Then, as if pulled by an invisible force, Zara leaned forward, her heart hammering. Asher hesitated only for a second before leaning in as well. Their lips met in a gentle, tentative kiss. It was a moment of stolen warmth in a gilded prison. They broke apart, breathless, eyes wide with the realization of what they'd done. Asher pulled back, guilt creasing his brow. Zara, if he ever found out. I know, she whispered, tears brimming again. I know. They both understood the danger. Mr. Hayes' jealousy could be lethal. Zara closed her eyes, recalling that controlling stare, the knowledge of what had happened to the women before her. Yet in this fleeting moment, she didn't regret seeking comfort in Asher's arms. She felt, for the first time in months, that she wasn't entirely alone in the palace. As the days wore on, the tension between Zara and Mr. Hayes grew thicker. He sensed her restlessness, often giving her suspicious looks when she asked to wander the grounds or visit the library. She feared he might be catching on to her budding connection with Asher. One morning, Ms. Graves informed Zara that Mr. Hayes would be traveling overseas on business for a week. Usually, he took her along, but this time he ordered her to remain at the palace. The news initially brought relief. She'd have a moment to breathe without his constant scrutiny. But that relief soon turned to anxiety. If he was leaving her behind, perhaps he was testing her loyalty, or planning something else. At lunch that day, Zara found Asher. They spoke in hushed tones near the servants' entrance, carefully avoiding security cameras. We have a week, maybe less, Zara said, her eyes darting around. I overheard something months ago about how he disposes of the women he grows tired of. He might be planning to do the same to me. Asher's face went grim. I've heard rumors among the guards. There's a reason they stay so loyal. Fear is a powerful motivator. Her voice trembled with desperation. Will you help me leave? He studied her face, wrestling with the implications. Leaving means betraying him. I'll lose everything, my job. Maybe my life if he finds us. But I can't stand by and do nothing. Zara reached out, gripping his hand. We could go into hiding. I have enough money left, or at least something to start over. But we need proof of his crimes. If we can expose him, he won't be able to come after us legally. Asher nodded slowly. Mr. Hayes keeps private documents in his study. I've guarded the door many times. If we can get inside while he's away and copy some files, it might be enough to ensure our safety. They both knew how risky this was. The palace security system was extensive, and Mr. Hayes still had loyal staff. But Zara had no other choice. If she stayed, she was living on borrowed time. While Mr. Hayes was away, Asher created a small window of opportunity by temporarily disabling some security cameras in the West Wing, claiming they needed routine maintenance. Late one night, he escorted Zara to the locked study. The palace was silent, most of the staff asleep or stationed at less critical points. Asher produced a key card from his pocket. This will let us in, he whispered. Zara's heart pounded so loudly, she feared it would echo in the corridors. Inside, the study was dark, illuminated only by a single desk lamp Asher switched on. Ornate bookshelves lined the walls, but it was the massive mahogany desk that drew Zara's attention. She rummaged through drawers until she found a laptop, which was password protected. Can you hack it? Zara whispered. Asher nodded, producing a small USB stick. I've done some digging into the palace systems. This might help us bypass the password. They worked frantically, adrenaline surging through their veins. The USB tool allowed partial access to the laptop. Zara clicked through folders labeled assets, investments, royal agreements, and more. The language was dense with legal jargon, but one folder caught her eye. Confidential, personal. Opening it, she found subfolders with women's names. Each folder contained scanned contracts, personal data, and Zara's stomach turned. Notations about termination dates. Oh my God, she breathed, scrolling through. These are the other women. This proves he did something to them. Asher's face hardened. We need to copy everything. Zara inserted another USB drive and began transferring the files. The progress bar inched forward, painfully slow. Every second felt like an eternity. Each distant sound a potential threat. At last, the transfer completed. Zara ejected the drive, clutching it in her trembling hand. "Let's go," Asher urged. They carefully erased their tracks as best as they could and locked the study behind them. Slipping back into the corridor, they parted ways, arranging to meet later in a discreet location to finalize their escape. They chose a stormy night. Rain lashed the palace windows, and thunder rattled the glass. Most staff preferred to remain indoors, giving Zara and Asher a chance to slip through the grounds unseen. Zara dressed in plain clothes, a backpack slung over her shoulder containing the precious USB drive, a change of clothes, and whatever cash she had in hand. Heart hammering, she made her way to the side gate where Asher had promised to meet her. The plan was to scale part of the perimeter wall that wasn't well guarded. Asher would disable sensors briefly, allowing them to slip out. From there, they'd find a car Asher had hidden and drive to a safe house. Zara huddled under a small overhang, rain drenching her hair and soaking her clothes. Minutes ticked by. She grew increasingly nervous. What if Asher had been caught? Just as panic set in, she spotted his silhouette approaching. "Sorry," he whispered, out of breath. "Rochester's men have been patrolling, but I think I lost them." They hurried to the wall, Asher helping Zara climb first. Lightning illuminated the sky, revealing the swirling patterns of wrought iron at the top of the wall. Zara's hand slipped, but Asher steadied her, adrenaline pushing them onward. Just as they reached the top, a voice shouted in the distance, "Stop! Who's there?" Flashlight beams cut through the darkness. Guards running toward them. Asher urged Zara over, but the wet surface made her slip, and she tumbled hard onto the other side, landing painfully on her ankle. She bit back a cry as Asher vaulted over the wall after her. Alarms blared through the night, red lights illuminating the palace grounds. Rain hammered down, making it hard to see. Asher pulled Zara to her feet, supporting her weight. "Come on," he shouted over the storm. They sprinted as best they could, hearing the shouts of guards behind them. The car was hidden off a small access road. Asher fumbled with the keys, the engine finally roaring to life. Headlights cut through the driving rain as he stepped on the gas. Their escape had begun, but with the palace security alerted, Zara wondered if they would make it out of the country alive. Roaring down the slick roads, Asher navigated hairpin turns while Zara clutched the USB drive. Her ankle throbbed, but she ignored the pain. In the rearview mirror, they saw distant headlights, pursuers from the palace. The chase was harrowing, lightning strobing across the sky. The palace cars were catching up, their engines built for speed. Asher clenched the steering wheel, scanning for a hidden exit or back road. Eventually, the winding route brought them near an abandoned industrial complex. Asher veered off the main road, hoping to lose their pursuers. The car skidded on wet concrete, fishtailing before regaining traction. Zara's hands gripped the dashboard, her heart hammering like thunder. Shots rang out, bullets pinging off the metal walls of a deserted warehouse. Asher slammed the brakes, and they tumbled out of the vehicle, seeking cover behind a stack of rusted machinery. "We have to get out of here," Zara yelled, voice shaky. "This place is a dead end." Asher scanned the area. "I called for backup right before we left. If the information we have is big enough, the authorities should respond." Zara only hoped they weren't too late. The sound of footsteps splashing through puddles told them the palace guards were closing in. Suddenly, the wail of police sirens echoed in the distance. Headlights from multiple vehicles flooded the warehouse area, and uniformed officers poured out, weapons drawn. The palace guards hesitated, uncertain whether to engage in a firefight with official law enforcement. Amidst the confusion, Asher stood, hands raised, shouting, "We have evidence. We have proof of multiple crimes committed by Alexander Hayes." He gestured to Zara, who clutched the USB drive. The police, clearly briefed on the significance of the situation, advanced cautiously. The palace guards froze, unsure of their next move. Then, in a sudden flurry, they tried to retreat. The police quickly surrounded them, forcing them to drop their weapons. Zara leaned against the machinery, tears of relief streaming down her face. She felt Asher's comforting hand on her shoulder. They had done it. They had escaped. But what about Mr. Hayes? Later, in a secured police station, Zara and Asher handed over the USB drive. Investigators spent hours combing through the files. One official, a stern-looking detective, approached them. "This is substantial evidence," he said. "These documents implicate Mr. Hayes in human trafficking, illegal contract agreements, and even possible homicide. We've been trying to build a case for years, but he's always been untouchable." Zara shuddered, recalling the conversation she'd overheard in the palace. There was no doubt in her mind that Hayes was capable of murder. The police coordinated an international operation, contacting the authorities in Mr. Hayes' home country. When his private jet landed, he was met by law enforcement officials armed with arrest warrants. News of the billionaire king's downfall spread like wildfire across the media, stirring shock and outrage. In a small interrogation room, Zara was asked to provide a statement. She recounted her experiences, from the desperate signing of the contract to the horrors she overheard. Every detail spilled out in a cathartic rush. Hours later, she emerged, exhausted but feeling an overwhelming sense of liberation. Asher was waiting for her. He had a bandage on his arm, a bullet grazed from the chase. The sight made her heart lurch. "You're hurt," Zara exclaimed, moving to him. He tried to brush it off with a wry smile. "Just a scratch. I'm okay." Zara gently touched the bandage. "You risked everything for me." He met her gaze, his voice low. "I'd do it again in a heartbeat." They stood in the station hallway, the weight of their ordeal pressing on them, yet also a sense of triumph that Mr. Hayes could no longer terrorize anyone else. 2 weeks later, Zara was back in her home country, stepping onto the cracked pavement of her old neighborhood. The difference was that her father no longer struggled under crippling debt, and her siblings had enough food to eat. The hush of early morning wrapped the streets in silence as she made her way to their apartment. Her father, still recovering, rose from the couch with a beaming smile when he saw her. Marina and Finn crowded around, hugging her tightly. Tears streamed down Zara's cheeks as she realized how close she had come to never seeing them again. She explained, as simply as she could, that Mr. Hayes was gone, arrested for his crimes. There was no need to hide her ordeal anymore. Her father's eyes filled with guilt and gratitude, but Zara reassured him. "Papa, you're not to blame. I made the choice, and now we're free." She spent the next few days reconnecting with her siblings, helping her father with chores, and slowly returning to a sense of normalcy. Yet she knew she couldn't remain in this neighborhood forever. The money she had already received would cover her family's immediate needs, but she wanted a better future for them, and for herself. One of her first moves was to enroll in evening classes at a local college. Stepping onto the campus for the first time, she was flooded with memories of her old dreams. To become a lawyer and fight for justice. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe she could still be that person. She sat in the campus courtyard, flipping through a book on criminal law, feeling a sense of purpose blossom within her. The experiences she had gone through, the near brush with a cruel fate, all of it could fuel her determination to help others who might be trapped in impossible situations. A month later, after some legal hurdles, Asher also arrived in her hometown. They met at a small cafe, the morning sun reflecting in the windows. Zara's heart fluttered as she saw him step inside, scanning the room until he spotted her. He made his way over, smiling tentatively. "How are you?" she asked, standing to greet him, her eyes shining with relief and happiness. "Better now," he said, letting their fingers entwine. They spent hours talking over coffee, sharing their plans. Asher had used some of his savings to start anew, free from Mr. Hayes' shadow. He was considering starting a private security consulting business, something legitimate, where he could use his skills without compromising his conscience. When Zara revealed her intention to study law, his eyes lit up with pride. "You'll be amazing," he said. "Everything you've gone through, you'll use it to help people." In the following weeks, Asher rented a modest apartment not far from Zara's family. He visited often, bringing groceries, helping her father with physical therapy exercises, and occasionally taking Marina and Finn for outings to the park. The children adored him, and Zara's father, once wary, came to trust him too. As the months rolled on, Zara's life transformed in ways she never thought possible. She juggled college classes, part-time work, and caring for her family, but a newfound strength fueled her. The dark memories of the palace and the contract gradually receded, replaced by the warmth of hope and resilience. One day, after an evening law class, she and Asher walked along the riverbank, the city lights reflecting on the water. He stopped abruptly, pulling her close. "I'm proud of you," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've come so far." She leaned into him, her voice steady. "We've both come far, and we're just getting started." As they kissed under the moonlit sky, Zara felt no cages, no contracts, no fear. She was free, and she intended to make the most of every second of her hard-won freedom. Years later, Zara would look back on that period of her life and marvel at her own resilience. She would remember the contracts, the gilded prison, and the moment she discovered the dark truth behind Mr. Hayes' power. She would remember the fear of being another nameless victim, but she would also remember how she fought back, how she found an ally in Asher, and how she used her ordeal as a stepping stone rather than a grave. Her decision to sign that vile contract had been born of desperation, but it did not define her. Through courage, love, and determination, she carved a new path, a path where she could stand tall as a law student, a daughter, and a survivor determined to protect others from the fate she narrowly escaped. In the end, Zara was far from broken. She was a phoenix, risen from the ashes of despair, carrying the lessons of her past as a shield for her future. And with Asher by her side, she knew she had someone to lean on, someone who understood the darkness they both had escaped. Their story of a broke, innocent girl sold into a billionaire's clutches had transformed into one of defiance, courage, and ultimately, a triumphant new beginning. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please go ahead and generously hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating stories like this.